So I get asked a lot, Josh, how did you go from absolutely nothing, absolute zero, zero knowledge, $0, zero everything, to being able to make $80,000 a month with the business in less than 1.5 years and wake up to a view in Dubai like this, and being able to travel all over the world? So I'm gonna basically break down my story in this video, kind of what led me here, how I was able to do it in a pretty short period of time. And hopefully, I know a lot of you guys have been asking for this, and asking about kind of, Josh, how did you get here? How did you do all this? So hopefully this kind of clears that up a little bit and gives you some insight into how I do it, into how I did it, so that you guys can kind of follow the same idea that I did. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So I'll see you guys in the computer. All right, so I've got some notes. There's a few things that obviously I want to cover and remember to cover, just because there's a lot of stuff that's happened. But yeah, let's jump into it. So basically, everything kind of changed for me in September 2022. This is when I actually started, but this is when kind of like my mindset began to shift, right? So basically, up until September of 2022, that was when I was in high school, like before that, right? And basically just terrible like character traits overall, when it comes to just like doing anything important, right? I was super antisocial. I mean, to be fair, I'm still quite a bit of an introvert right now, right? But I didn't know how to talk to people. I basically just played video games all day, and just played stupid things on my computer. Had pretty much no impulse control. I would eat anything that looked good that came my way. Thankfully, I was still an athlete, so I wasn't terribly fat, but still not super fit, right? Obviously, terrible luck with women. Didn't really have any results in that area of my life up until this point. Just terrible person, like just terrible character traits overall to like for someone who actually needs to accomplish something important in their life, right? I had two things that were going for me, basically, which was that I was decent at school. I didn't really try, but I got decent grades. And then I was pretty good at volleyball, and I was on like the 5th team in the country for club volleyball in like U18 division, right? So that was okay. And things were just very easy for me. I don't have the story of like, my parents were coming from this like poor background and like I needed to like retire them, which I hear a lot. Is like, I'm not from that. I was like, I'm like high middle class, right? So it's like it's like this is almost it's this place where you are kind of, you have the level of it's like the golden handcuffs analogy, right? Where it's like you're comfortable enough to not want to actually change anything, right? And that's kind of the story of my life up until September, right? Is that I was like, I didn't really have to work hard for anything really in my life up until this point. So basically what changed is I went to university. I went to a university called Western University, and I went into engineering, which was obviously, it's like one of the harder undergraduates, and I went into that, right? And that was kind of like, yeah, this is you're set on this trajectory. You're going to be an engineer. You'll make like low 6 figures a year, and then like 100 grand a year, and then that's it, pretty much. And I didn't really think of anything else, right? I'm like, okay, well, this job pays money, and I'm good at math, so this just sounds like what I should do, right? This is what everyone does. So that's before that, right? Now, I was also on the varsity volleyball team at my school, and what basically ended up happening, right, is the old me kind of went into this like new environment that I obviously was not fit to actually be in, right? Like I was not a good enough person. I did not have good enough qualities as a human to be able to succeed in an environment where I was in engineering, which is a lot harder than high school, right? And volleyball on like a varsity level, right? The difference between like university and like before university is obviously very, very big, right? And I was not like prepared for what that would require from me at the time, right? So basically what ended up happening in October of 2022 was this was like the pivot point in my life, right? Where I was kind of faced with this decision where I was kind of like school was I was doing horrible, right? Like engineering, like again, like this is it sounds like it's like really you couldn't do this, but it's like you have to study for like 6 to 8 hours a day, and I know that's like not very it doesn't sound like it's a lot, and it's not, right? But when you come from like just doing nothing in high school, like literally nothing, to having to basically work full-time job, that it's like, whoa, this is a big shift, right? So I actually had to do something, and I wasn't doing anything before October, and I'm like, okay, well, something has to change, or I'm gonna basically just fail. Um, and then the same thing with volleyball, right? I came from like being like the top shit, like one of the best teams in the country, starting all this great stuff, and then now I was like the bottom of the barrel who no one gave a shit about, right? And I was just the bench rider, and that like shift, like that is very painful. So basically, what ended up happening is it's like, okay, you got to make a decision. The only two things that are going for you in your life are basically going to be taken away if you don't like change your way of acting, right? So basically, I don't know which day it was, but on the very next day where I actually came to this conclusion that I needed to change, I basically just went from 0 to 100. I haven't really, I mean, every now and then, right? But I haven't really eaten junk food since then. I haven't really played any video games at all. Like, I deleted everything from my computer, and just put all of my energy into volleyball and school. And basically, like the peak of that was like I would wake up at 4:30 in the morning to do cardio in my backyard in -10-degree weather, because I didn't want to be on the bench anymore. Like this is kind of the level that it was taken to, which kickstarted like being able to actually succeed in something where you need a lot of discipline, obviously, right? And that was like, there's an analogy that I like to use, kind of like that represents this phase of my life. When you throw a gladiator into the gladiator pit, right? They either die or they become like a warrior, right? And I think that's like pretty sums it up, right? A lot of people put themselves into these difficult positions, and some of them just involuntarily get thrown into that position, and you kind of have to just like, well, are you just gonna like lose everything? What happens to most people, right? And they go into business and then they just like they lose to business, right? Or you have to become a different and a better person, right? Which is obviously what I was able to do, and that was kind of the time where I did it, right? After that, and after I actually learned how to be useful, basically, is life actually became pretty easy again, right? Because now, when everyone is going to the bar at like midnight on like a Wednesday afternoon, and you're working, you're studying for like 10 hours a day, and then you're practicing volleyball for like 3.5 hours a day, you kind of just become like everything becomes easier because you're better. Like your work ethic is just better than everyone else, and I think I'm like a decently smart person. You can see I can't even say it's like use grammar properly, right? But I'm not like the fact that I would just outwork everyone, just made it it just made it so easy to succeed, right? And there's like a couple roommates I have that'll do absolutely nothing and still get better grades than me because they're obviously just like smart and they can do less and get more. But that doesn't really work in business. But anyway, that's not kind of the point I'm trying to make, is that when you are like average in terms of your intelligence and you just work 10 times harder than everyone else, like it's very easy. And I think that if you just expand your time horizon and just think in these longer term windows, and if you just try harder than everyone else, it's pretty hard to fail, honestly, because the competition does not do anything. And I notice this a lot as well on sales calls. A lot of the time, the people that I'm talking to, like I'll ask them, this is completely sidetracked, by the way, we'll get back to the point. But I'll ask them like what they've done in the past. Like you can tell, right? They're like, I help people with appointment booking, right? I can tell they've been having this problem for like 2 years. And you ask them like what they've done in the last 2 years to actually scale their business and fix this problem. And they'll make like some excuse like I didn't have the time, right? And you know, it's like, this is why it's so easy to succeed, is because people will keep making these excuses to themselves as to why they haven't done anything about the situation, right? Anyways, that's basically kind of my story. And then once things became easier again, this was kind of in like March, April of 2023, I was like, okay, well, like, imagine what I could do with this new like paradigm and this new worldview and this new work ethic if I actually like imagine what I could accomplish, right? Is basically what I was thinking. Because I was in like one of the top like my team, they got third place this year, which is like my starting like my class is now starting, right? Obviously I'm not on the team anymore and we'll get to that. But yeah, like we were like the third best team in the league this year. So like it was a pretty solid team that I was a part of, and I was doing quite well. And I still wasn't starting yet, but I was significantly better than I was before. And I was doing well in engineering. Like I had like above 80s on average, which is pretty good in university. And I was like, well, imagine like what else I could accomplish. You know, like I started to think bigger once these other things became easier that I thought were hard before, right? And then basically what happened from there is like, okay, well, I want to do something more difficult. I want to do something challenging. And then I also figured, well, I might as well make money doing it, right? And then obviously you search up how to make money online on YouTube. And then you see Iman's, I'm just saying you, like this is everyone, I'm assuming, right? But I saw Iman's best business model video and how to start an SMMA, and then down the rabbit hole I went, right? So this is May 2023 when I actually started my business. And this is like when I made the logo for JKD Marketing, which is originally what my business was called. Now it's called JKD Agency, and I'll explain why it kind of changed, but it's the same thing, right? So I started the business in May of 2023, and my first offer was to do Facebook ads for immigration lawyers, right? Now, I will explain why this did not work and what I did to basically change what I was doing. So what ended up happening at this point, right, is I was working very hard. Like I would wake up at 4:30 and I would go to bed at like midnight, and maybe not midnight, maybe like 10:30, 11, sometimes midnight, right? And have all the cold showers, do all like the monk mode things, right? And I was working really hard, but I was working in all the wrong directions, right? Because I didn't know what leverage was, right? And I didn't know what, like, you know, all of this, what I know right now, right? But so I was working really hard, but I was working on like stupid things like making high level automations and making websites and doing all this shit, right? So then what I ended up doing is in about, yeah, I think right after I started the business, I moved back home for the summer, right? And then summer of 2023, I had like $2,000 in my bank account, which is obviously, there's like $2,000 Canadian, right? So it's like $1.5 grand, right? So not really enough to actually do anything. So what I ended up doing is I took a job at an electronics company in a warehouse, making the equivalent to 10 USD per hour, to make money to pay for the business expenses, to pay for like software and automations and like coaching and all this stuff, right? And then I also sold all the valuable things that I owned, which was basically just my computer gaming setup, which I got like $1.5 grand for, and then I sold that, right? Then what ended up happening, and this was interesting. So I was on a sales call with basically one of the SMA gurus, right? And I obviously did not have the money for it, right? It was like a lot of money. And then basically after that call, the next day, or maybe it was even the same day, some like one of those like Instagram accounts, like guru course, like, and then just a bunch of numbers, right? One of those Instagram accounts DM'd me, and was like, hey, do you want this guy's course for like $50? And reluctantly I said yes, actually. And I actually got the course, and I did pay the $50, right? Which is surprising that I actually got it, right? But that was actually really helpful. And then the next month, I was able to, from that course, I learned how to book meetings a little bit. And I was getting like 2 to 3 appointments a week with some cold email campaigns, right? And then I learned a bunch of stuff, like just like foundational knowledge, which is really important. Yeah, that's basically that. From there, I didn't really have success on sales calls. Shocker, right? Because I didn't know what I was doing. I also did not have the personality for it. At the time, obviously, I've taken over 1,000 at this point, and I've learned kind of how to conduct them properly, right? But I got my first client, and I'll say like I got my first client in August. It was just basically my hairdresser paid me $100 to set up this Google Maps thing, which was interesting. It was kind of this, it kind of like opened my mind a little bit to understanding that, yeah, people actually will pay you for stuff, right? And it kind of, it's not really, the money isn't important. But at that time, like seeing that you doing this can actually have some benefit over the long run, right? So that was good. Still no luck on the actual like cold email sales call, like this kind of stuff, right? Then what ended up happening is I kept pitching these people. I think I had like 15, 20 calls with these people. I think these immigration people. And what I realized was, and these lawyers, what I realized was I didn't really know what I was talking about when it comes to like pitching these services, right? So I was talking about, I was talking about the Facebook ads that I was going to help them with and all this stuff. And it was pretty apparent, I think, that I didn't know anything about Facebook ads because I didn't. So what I ended up doing is I changed the offer to do LinkedIn and cold email outreach for coaches and agency owners. And that was like a done for you offer. And the reason I did that because I was booking like 2 to 3 appointments a week, and I thought that was good, which it was not horrible, right? It's better than most people are doing. So I switched the offer to that, which is something that I actually knew about, right? And then I rolled that out in around September, right? And this September of 2023, this was like another level of work. So at this point, because May, right when I started, I was already kind of like finished the semester. I was finished the year, the first year for my engineering, right? In September of 2023, this was like the worst and the best time of like my life, right? From like September to like December, basically, of 2023. This was like, I'll explain why, right? Basically, what I was doing was, because I was on the varsity volleyball team still, I was also in engineering, and I was also running this business, right? So I would spend probably like, what I would do is I would spend like 10 hours a day on the business. Then I would go to volleyball, and I would spend probably 2 hours a day practicing on average, probably a little bit more than that if you include going to and from the place. And I would work out 5 times a week, basically, which also took me another hour a day. And then I would do school for like 4 hours a day. And that was kind of like my routine. And I literally was sleeping like 5 hours. Like if I got 6 hours sleep, like that was like good at the time. And every morning I can remember this feeling walking to class and just having like this massive amount of brain fog and just like hardly being able to think. And it was brutal. But at the same time, it was like this adrenaline feeling was also like, it like weirdly was like, it kind of triggered some good things in my mind. I have fond memories of this. But I also remember that this was like the hardest probably that I've actually ever like physically worked. And it was just the sheer amount of volume that I literally put into this. It was like 17 hours of work a day. And it was amazing and it was horrible all at the same time. But yeah, anyways, that's kind of like the state that I was in for probably the next 3 to 4 months. So what ended up happening here is I changed kind of the pricing structure of the offer. I was doing like a 2K a month retainer with the guarantee. I then realized that people don't really trust guarantees and will just buy from you because you have a guarantee. And there was no reason for anyone to trust me other than the fact that I was booking a few calls myself. I took like 50 calls in total and I closed no one, like literally no one. I had someone say yes, and then I was like, oh, I closed them, and then I didn't take the money on the call, right? And then obviously they didn't pay me, which is kind of how it goes. This is why you take money on the call, right? But yeah, anyways, I had like 50 calls, closed no one. I'm like, okay, well, why don't I just do pay and results? So that's what I did. I did like $100 setup fee just so that the clients wouldn't ghost me. And then I would do the outreach for them. And that actually went pretty well. So I started closing at like 25%, obviously because it's a no-brainer offer, right? And then I signed my first client like late in September, like my first actually like cold outreach client I signed in like late September, not including that like Google Maps thing, right? And then I signed about like 10 more in the next 4 to 5 weeks. I was booking like 60 meetings a month or something at that point. And then what ended up happening is in about October-ish, I was making like 2.5, 3 grand a month, something like that. Just from all these like pay on result clients. And then I ended up quitting the volleyball team in October because of the reasons that I was talking about like 3 minutes ago. It was just, I could not do everything, right? I would have quit university, but you can't stay on the team and quit university, right? That's not how it works. But anyways, I quit the volleyball team, still was in school. The business was making a little bit of money. And like I was saying, with engineer volleyball business, like I had to just pick 2, right? Ideally you'd pick 1, right? But I didn't have I couldn't really drop out yet, because I was still kind of broke. So at this point, like I was saying, making about 2.5 per month. The problem here was that the expenses I was incurring were also about 2.5 grand a month. And I was spending some money on some stupid shit, which I now realize, but I didn't at the time. So like I was literally making no money, basically. I was making some revenue, but nothing was profit, right? I wasn't actually keeping anything. I had like some VAs and some softwares that I was paying for. And then that's basically that. And I had about $3,000 in the bank at this point. And I started the September with like August with like 7K from my warehouse job, which I obviously stopped after the summer, right? So that was kind of this point, right? Now this is where things got a little bit interesting. So in November, I basically bought my first high ticket program, which was like 5K. And then I was like, okay, well, I don't have 5K. And then they're like, okay, well, let's do 2.5K. And then I somehow bought that, which was basically, obviously I had 3K. So it was like basically everything I had, right? So I continued to do this pay per result offer in December, but what I started doing is I started charging for the results before I got them, right? So what I would do is I would charge $100 per appointment, and then that's kind of the model that I had before, and just like $100 setup fee. What I ended up changing to was it was like you had 2 options, which was kind of sneaky. I would like send a message to people saying, hey, it's like pay after results, right? And then I would get on the call. It's like, okay, so it's $200 per appointment, or if you pay for the first 15 up front, it's 75 per appointment, right? And then some people were like, what the hell, Josh, right? But most people actually did not care, and they were just like, okay, either no or someone would pay up front. And then I got my first personal like high ticket deal, charging up front in December to a guy named Benny. Benny, if you're watching this, I love you, man. And that was like my first actually like signed upfront, paid upfront client. And he paid me $75 for 15 appointments. And that was basically that, right? And I got that from like the sales training that I got from the program, which was awesome, right? So I had my first client that I actually got paid for, which was like amazing, right? And then this is the problem. This is where things get interesting, right? So what ended up happening with this high ticket program, right? Here we go. So is that basically the person who like owned the program, which I didn't even get to talk to, right? I was talking to this other coach, and he was great. But the guy who owned the actual business, right? Or the guy who actually owned the business. Basically, what ended up happening is he was the guru, right? He said he wanted to like quote unquote partner with my business. Obviously, I'm not going to say who it was, right? But he said he would get some people to do the service delivery. He said he would get some people to do the sales, and then he was going to like lead the thing, and then I would just do the appointment booking, which I thought was a great idea because that's what I was good at. And obviously, I'm going to listen to the person who's making he was making like 70 grand a month or something at the time, right? So I'm like, okay, well I'm going to listen to you because you're obviously better at business than me. And then from there, basically, I was decided to go all in. So all the money I made from that client, all of my money, basically, I just put into appointment booking. and like getting appointments for this new offer that we made, right? Which was like kind of similar, but we were charging like $5,000 to like agencies, and I wasn't selling it because I didn't really know how to sell like a $5,000 thing, right? So some other guy was selling it, and then we had this this offer that we basically invented in like a weekend, and then I was booking like 4 to 5 appointments a day, which was good because obviously like I invested a lot into this, right? And this was through like Twitter outreach and Facebook outreach and Instagram outreach. I was kind of doing all 3 of those at the time. And then this is what ended up happening, right? So I put all my money into this appointment booking for this new offer, right? And I have these like 3 like kind of business partners basically. What ended up happening like a week later is that they changed their mind, right? Basically, we build out this whole thing. I spend all my money into booking meetings for this new offer, and then they changed their mind. So now what basically happened is all 3 of these guys left, including the guy who owned the program that I bought, right? And now I was $1,000 in debt, basically. So I spent more than I had a little bit, which I didn't actually mean to, because normally I would never do that. But I guess I accidentally. Actually, I think what I did is I went to 0, and then I still owed my VA like $800, right? So I was basically $1,000 in debt, right? And I had a bunch of different appointments, and I had nothing to sell at this point, which was like, well, that's really terrible. The worst part about this is though, what ended up, like I went back because I still paid $2,500 for this program, right? For this like high ticket thing. I went to go back and they didn't let me, like they just ghosted me. Like they did not let me back in. So like what they were telling me like was good. It obviously helped me close my first deal. But they, I guess after that, it was kind of a scam. But anyways, that whole thing happened, and that put me in a worse position than I was before, right? So that was a really, really tough time. I think I had like a panic attack, not like full on, but like a mini, like being, like one of those like you're like breathing heavy for like 30 minutes, like right in the middle of my exam, because it was December, right? And that was not fun. Anyways, January, I was coming up with January 2024, right? So basically, I was starting from nothing. So I was almost in the mindset of like, okay, well, I'm just gonna continue to do this. This is not gonna be all of my energy going into this. Like I'm gonna actually, because I was like doing horrible in school at this point, right? Because I was not putting, I was putting maybe 2 to 3 to 4 hours of time into it a day, because like I did not care that much, because I knew this isn't what I wanted to do. And I was doing bad. So in January, I'm like, you know what, I just got completely screwed over. I'm going to continue to run this business, but it's going to like switch priorities, right? Like I'm going to spend 4 hours a day on this business, keep it going, try and like continue to learn, continue to get better. And eventually it will work. But I'm going to make sure I put at least 8 hours a day into school, right? That was kind of the mindset going into January. But obviously that did not happen. So January comes in. I had a new offer, and the new offer was basically to do. Basically, the new offer was that I was going to do Instagram outreach on like a retainer results model. And at this point, I actually I had some connections built out. So I was obviously good at outreach, right? So I knew quite a few people in the space. I had a friend who was he owned one of the softwares that was like automating the Instagram outreach, right? And his name's Carson. I love you, Carson, if you're watching this, man. Like this fucking changed my life. Anyways, basically I got like 2 or 3 clients from him. And I had another consulting client from before who would pay me like $800 a month to help him with some of the LinkedIn outreach, right? And then I got from Carson, I got like a $2,000 a month client, and then another $1,000 a month client. And at this point, like I got like these random clients from nowhere, and then I was basically no longer in debt. This was honestly a bit of luck here, that I was able to get this, but I was good at what I did, so it ended up happening, right? February. After doing some outreach, now actually trying to get clients for this new offer that I was going to sell for like a higher ticket price, I actually got, again, like I was talking to people who knew people. I got referred a $4,000 a month client. Again, this is kind of luck. and then I got a few smaller ones as well. And then in February, I hit my first 10K per month. Again, at this point still, I was not, didn't know how to cut expenses. So I was still spending like 6-7 grand a month when I hit that 10K per month. So it wasn't, but I was like above water, and it was like, it was amazing. So at this point, I decided I was like, okay, my margin is too low. And like, it wasn't really, like, the offer wasn't systemized. Like, if I were to go back, I would have probably just had, okay, this is the set retainer, this is the set price, and I'm just gonna sell people into this, and it's gonna be a single service delivery, and then I would just continue to go for higher and higher deals. That's going back what I would have done. Like, with kind of, actually, I probably wouldn't have, because obviously things worked out, right? But if I were to like give advice to someone kind of in that situation, that's what I would recommend to grow the agency, right? At this point though, this is what I decided to switch more into the consulting model. I had a couple clients that were just paying me retainers, just to help them with their outreach, right? Instead of doing the done for you, because I thought that this would be the thing that increases my profit margins. And it obviously did. But I think you can obviously increase your profit margins with done for you, right? But I ended up doing the done with you route. And I am very happy that I did that. And we kind of took off since there. So what happened then is, now I had this new like consulting offer, right? In March 2024, this is when I really started to book a bunch of meetings for the offer. And then I hit $15,000 in like cash collected in March. I think we made like over 30 grand revenue, like in March, which was like, we like basically went from 0 in December to 30 grand a month in revenue in March, which was very cool. And then I basically just started to book a bunch of meetings for that offer. I think, yeah, I don't exactly remember what I was selling it for at the time. But I was learning how to properly sell people at this point, right? Which was obviously, the most difficult thing for me in building the business, right? Because I'm not naturally like extroverted or charismatic, right? Now that's what I ended up doing. And this was actually a very big moment for me, and I'll put like a picture on this video or something. But this is where I remember, this is where it felt like everything actually paid off. And I remember, I think this was like my third or fourth, I think this was like my fourth sale of the month, and it was like a painful, and I was just like crying my eyes out at this point. And I think I closed, that was like my second deal of the day. And I made like 5 grand in a day, and I remember I was crying because it was like, holy shit, this is like all of the last 12 months of just suffering is actually worth it. That's like making me a little bit emotional, but I remember that very clearly. And then I donated like $200 or something to a charity that I wanted to, like immediately after that. And it was amazing. Yeah, that was March. And I was on like a very, very high note right there. Okay, after that, April to July. So this was pretty uneventful. We were around like 10 to 15K a month on average throughout this period of time. So we dropped a little bit. What ended up happening, there's a couple things I want to talk about. What ended up happening here in the end of March, early April, is that I made a very stupid decision. We were getting, I think, like 70 appointments a month, something like that, which was like 3 a day, basically, like 3 a day, 6 days a week. What I ended up stupidly doing is I thought it would be a good idea to hire a sales rep, right? Now, obviously, like we made 15K cash collected that month, right? The problem, this is like so many freaking people do this, and this pisses me off a little bit because I made the same mistake, right? Is that you hire a sales guy because you think you have so many calls, but you like really don't, right? And then you underestimate like the amount of leverage that is actually like, sales is everything, right? Sales calls from 0 to like 50K a month, that's like everything, right? As soon as you delegate that, there's a couple things you do. Number one is you run the risk of losing all of your money, right? So this is literally what happened to me. Is I hired the sales guy and he didn't perform, and that was actually my fault because there's a couple other reasons why he didn't work out. But he didn't perform, and then now all the appointments were going to this random dude, and like we made like he closed no deals, right? I think he closed like 2 deals like right before I let him go. But basically, all of the appointments revenue was just lost, right? And then we made $0 for like almost on like 30 days straight, which was obviously terrible. And I lost like 15 grand by doing that. So don't do that. And the reason why it didn't work out was for a few things. Number one, if you're making 15 grand a month cash and you're trying to hire a rep, think about the math, right? If you're paying them 15% commission, which is already a lot, like you probably don't want to pay more than 10, like maybe for your first couple of reps. My sales guy right now, like my first guy, I paid him 14%. Obviously, like future reps coming on is not going to be that high because like it doesn't like mathematically make sense with the margin and everything like that, right? But I'm paying my first guy 14%, right? Anyways, let's say you pay 15%, which is pretty high, right? If he's doing as good as you at sales, which he is probably not going to do as well as you, right? That's just the reality of the situation. You're probably not going to close as high as the founder, right? If he did, let's say he somehow managed to do as good as you, right? And he made 15K cash collected, let's say 20K, right? Because probably with the payment plans extended, it would be like 25K, right? Let's say even 25K, right? Is if you do the math, 15% times 25K is like, what is that? It's like 37, right? 3,700, right? So what you're trying to find now is you're trying to look for a top rep that's going to get paid $3,700 a month, right? Which like no one is going to do that, right? Because like sales is a lot of hard work, right? Like it's a very difficult thing to do. And someone who has like a capacity of making $3,700 a month with no proof of concept on the offer, it's just like not going to happen. And again, these numbers, this is very optimistic, 3,700, right? So it doesn't really make any sense. The second thing that was a problem is I only closed like 8 clients on the offer before I hired this guy, right? So I had like 2 good calls that I could actually show him, right? So when I hired my sales rep for the second time, and this time he is actually good and he's worked out, is I could give him like 30 examples of like perfect 1-call closes, and I had the exact script. I had like hundreds of call recordings. I had like case studies. I had a lot more money as well, like everything, so that he could just come in here, like watch, like literally see me close 30 people, and then obviously, like it's a lot, like when you put someone into that environment, it's a lot easier for them to succeed. I didn't do that at the time. That's obviously why he didn't really work out, and that's basically what happened there. And that was a big mistake, and then he made them anyways, I think he actually was a good rep, and if I brought him on today, I think he would do well, but it was just at the time, like it was just my fault. Anyways, the other thing that I was going to say was kind of before this point, what was like the mindset that I had to have in order to actually do this, right? So I would watch a lot of YouTube. I would watch a lot of like Charlie Morgan and mostly Alex Hormozy, and I still watch all of Alex's stuff. I think it's just the best. But what this was like kind of my whole axiom for like thinking about doing this shit every day, right? There was kind of 2 things. One, I just had like a really good mentality. Like I read like David Goggins' books, and just having that mentality, honestly, that in my opinion is the only self-development book you need, is Can't Hurt Me, and I genuinely mean that. That book has changed my life. And then basically this I got from Alex, and I don't know if he says this exactly, but it's kind of the same pattern of thinking as kind of what he would say, right? Is that there are 2 things that I there were basically two like questions that I had to ask myself the answer to in order to justify whether all of this shit was worth it or not, right? Number one is, if I put 10 hours a day, not even 10 hours a day, let's say 5 hours a day, into building a lead generation agency. If I put 5 hours a day into building a lead generation agency specifically to help marketing agencies, and I do that through the same channel, and I do that like the exact same thing, and I just continue to get better every single day. I do the same agency for the next 10 years, and I consistently put 5 to 10 hours a day into that. Does it become unreasonable that I do not succeed? And the answer for me to that was yes, because I know if I don't like have the shiny object syndrome, this is one thing that was like kind of the cause to my success as well, is that I didn't change my thing a million different times, right? Like we kind of have had a very similar offer now for like over a year, like a year and a half at this point, almost. What most people do is they like change their niche like I've been in the same niche for almost 2 years, right? Like I changed my niche one time, and that was actually for like a completely different reason. But I changed my niche once, and then I just stuck with what I was doing for the whole time. I changed the delivery model once, but that's really kind of, it's like the same market, the same kind of business, the same niche, right? And the same solution. It was just a different way of delivering it. I didn't change any of that. And I think that being like sticking to the same thing for an extraordinarily long amount of time is what most people are unwilling to do to get what they want, right? So that's the first thing. And I said yes, because obviously there's a lot of people who have built successful lead generation agencies. So I knew that if like there's so many people that have done it before, like there is no reason why I shouldn't be able to, right? So that was the first question. The second question is it worth it, right? And that's actually a really important question, right? And to me at that point, it was absolutely worth it, because like I had no, like my whole thing for wanting to start this was my personal reason. And I know that everyone has their own different reasons as to why they do things, as to why they start their businesses. For me, it was more like, I want to become the best version of myself. And I don't want to leave any potential left on the table, basically. And that was like, that sounds, I know, super like, you probably you want to say that to make it sound like this thing, right? But it actually was, that is like, I even said at the start, like that's why I started everything, because I felt like I could accomplish more. And on top of that, I also didn't really enjoy engineering. But it was basically those two things. I felt that if I did this for the next 10 years, for 5 to 10 hours straight, that it would be unreasonable that I don't accomplish my goal and make at least like 20 grand a month. And then I also, I thought it was worth it. Like honestly, I was ready to do it for 20 years, or 10 years, sorry. It obviously didn't take that long, but I was ready for it too. And I would have continued if it did. So yeah, that was basically my philosophy. And I think when you can think like that, it removes some of the rush, and it also removes the temptation to try something new, because the only reason you try something new is because the thing you're doing, it feels like it's taking too long to start working, right? And then you go into that like 5-stage Hormozy thing that he talks about, with like the valley of despair, and then you just repeat and try the new thing and it never actually works, right? This is what most people do. Anyways, back to kind of the story, but I think that was helpful. So April to July 2024, this was pretty uneventful. Like I was saying, we were making about 10 grand a month on average, with like a 50% profit margin. Again, I still didn't know how to properly not spend money on unnecessary softwares, right? There were a few hard costs as well that I couldn't really avoid, but making about 50% profit margins. And it was like kind of painful, like just being stuck, you know, and it's always painful to be stuck, right? It's a lot less, this was much less painful than whatever, being stuck 6 months ago, because I was making $0. But it was still pretty painful, right? But it was also at the same time, it was a different kind of painful, right? because I think what happened here in this time frame is this: I was back home again because it was the summer, and the environment had kind of shifted, right? Because the thing is, like, I wasn't forced to be in this like grind mode anymore, you know? I was kind of in this environment that, again, like, this is where I had developed all of these like bad habits that I had before. And it was just like being in like a place, like the same place that you were back then, and like being able, like, just, again, like, I didn't really have control over what was in my pantry. I did to some extent, right? But like, there would be some like shit there that my brother would eat, and then I would go eat it as well, right? But just like bad environment overall. And that kind of put me in a situation where I was kind of a little bit comfortable again. And I wasn't like, I felt like I had accomplished something, and I didn't need to put myself through as much pain anymore. Which, the pain that you need to go through is not about like going from 0 to 1. It's about like evolving, right? To go from 0 to 1, you need to become a different person. You need to go through pain because you need to change, right? But people forget that it's the same thing to go from 10 to 50 and 50 to 100 and 100 to a million a month, right? Is that the only reason why you're not making that much money is because you aren't the kind of person who can yet, right? And to become the person who can, you need to suffer a little bit, because you need to change kind of the way you think and the way you act and what you do. So I didn't really put a lot of energy into any specific direction. I kind of just took the sales calls. I made a few sales, and that was it, right? So this is kind of the problem, right? Is at this point, I still sucked at sales calls, and I was kind of like, I still would close deals because of just the sheer volume of calls that I would take, like, but I still sucked, right? So basically what happened in August, this was near the end of summer, like this is early August, late July, right? I had like a 6% conversion rate. Like, it was bad, right? And in early August and late July, right, I kind of had enough. I'm like, okay, this is like, why the hell am I, like, I'm still not, like, at this point I had like 15K in the bank or something, like 10K. Like, I think it was like 15K. So it wasn't like a ton of money, right? It was like, obviously when you're making like $5,000 a month profit in university, you think you're better than everyone else, right? Which, like, you can't think like that, or else you're not going to continue to try and get better, right? Anyways, what ended up happening here is I had enough being stuck, and basically I decided to buy also Charlie Morgan's Mastermind. I bought that in August of 2025, which cost me, or sorry, I don't know why this is 2025. That's in the future, 2024, August 2024, which was more money than I had. So I was obviously on a payment plan, and I also bought Jack Roberts' sales program, and that was like a lot of money, right? So now I had like 4 figures in the bank, and I was like pretty scared at this point, because I was also spending like $5,000 a month on like just business operations. So it was like pretty scary. I was like, kind of, my back was against the wall. What ended up happening here is, like, this is typically what happens when you put yourself again in the gladiator pit. You either kill the thing or you just die, right? So I put myself in a corner again, and then what ended up happening is I just put like 10 hours a day into purely practicing sales, because this was obviously the bottleneck. Like, I was booking meetings. The show rate wasn't super high. It was like 60 something percent, which was like fine. It was like Instagram leads, so it was pretty standard, and there's not much you can do about that. My close rate was shit though. So if I could literally triple that, then I would triple my money, which is exactly what happened, right? So this is kind of the progression, and this is really cool. So in July, I closed at 6%. I made 13K. This is revenue, so cash collected is like 70% of this. So we collected like 10K basically. In August, I closed at 9%, made 19K. In September, I closed at 17%, this is now triple to what I closed in July, and we made 39K. So obviously we booked a few more meetings as well. In October, I closed at 20%. I made 64K. In November, I closed at 24% and I made 114K. And this month, in March, I actually didn't update this. We just made another sale yesterday. Nice. So this month, in March, I personally closed at 36%. My closer is closing at 20%, and we made 105K this month, right, at about 75% profit margin. So since obviously I made a video on this like 2 weeks ago and kind of been at the same point since November, we've been hovering around like 110 to like 80K revenue. Yeah, so this month so far we've made 105K. It's the 28th, so we got another 3 days. So we'll probably send another one. But that's basically kind of where we're at. And yeah, like personally, like I'm taking home like 50K, which is quite cool. And then we have like a 75% profit margin, and then like obviously Dubai is not cheap, so there's like some other money that escapes that I'm not including in my profit margin, right? But that's basically where we're at. So like at this point, like went from having $0 in the bank to an over 6-figure net worth by age 20. I'm 21 now. But yeah, so basically Jack Roberts, this is another shout out. I'm gonna shout out all the people who changed my life. Jack Roberts, I became like literally I 6x'd my close rate in 6 months, which is absurd, right? And now obviously I'm here, and Jack is here as well, which is pretty cool. I got to meet him in person yesterday, but really awesome. If you need help with sales, go to iClose Capital. That's his website. And buy his thing. I don't get a kickback for saying that, but he's amazing. So if you need help with that, go check him out. Yeah, basically what happened there is so November so this is my second time in Dubai. I was here in November as well. So that's like November. I actually like first spent some of my money, and I went to Dubai for the first time. I spent a lot more time the first time because I didn't know how to avoid some of the tourist fees. Like literally I'm in the same hotel as I was before and paying a third of the price because I figured out like you don't actually, the room service is like $400 a night, which I didn't know didn't have to get. But yeah, anyways, that's not really the point. But I actually properly spent money in November for the first time for Charlie's Mastermind. Which was cool. I don't really care a lot about like the cars and all this shit, and like the traveling and everything. I kind of say it as like a clickbait for the video. I enjoy it, but I'm definitely not like the guy who's gonna go and piss off the Bali and just like go around everywhere. Not like that there's a problem with it. I just feel like you can't properly do anything when you're traveling in a plane all over the time, right? Anyways, that's just how I feel. But yeah, so outside of the 2 trips I've had to Dubai, I haven't really gone anywhere, other than like home. I've gone for a couple of times, right? In January of 2025, which was like 3 months, I don't know, I looked at my watch, it's like I can see 3 months. But in January of 2025, I dropped out of university. And then basically, here we are. So that's pretty cool. That's my story. So if you were wondering, now you know how we basically got here. Goals for this year is I want to get to 300K a month. I want to get to 100K a month in profit. That will be really cool. I'm moving into my new apartment in next month, which I'm really, really, really excited for because I'm still living with my roommates from university, which they're great, but obviously not ideal. So that's gonna be really nice, and yeah, that's basically my story. So yeah, if you were wondering, now you know.